Hello, everybody, and welcome to this first segment of No I in Team. This is a little mini series I'm going to be running alongside the England player profiles and captains interviews, in which I'm going to be taking the team aside and getting them to talk about a topic related to Teams 40k and how you can master it, and sharing some of their wisdoms, telling us a little bit how it works, and getting inside the kind of mechanics and intricacies of Teams play. And joining me for this first one is the lovely Vik Vijay, who you'll hopefully have seen in the player profile. Vik, how are you doing?
I'm good. Hi,
Wonderful.
everyone.
Wonderful. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is a concept that Vic has actually introduced to me, which is the idea of blunting in teams and in teams matchups. So, Vic, I suppose it's going to be sensible for me to open it up to you and if let you explain a little bit what it is you mean by this and what its significant
Yeah.
is for those looking to play Teams 40k.
So I think in terms of what it actually means for teams, it's a role. It's a role within the team. But for me, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this topic, I think it goes wider than that in
Yeah.
teams. It's an actual technique or a
Mm.
style of playing or a philosophy to the
Yeah.
game. So in terms of the role, let's start with that, with the actual
Okay.
definition. A blunting army or a blunting role is where you are an army that can play against a wide range of factions, including the armies at the very top, the best armies in the meta, and make sure that you don't lose by a lot of points.
Yeah.
In teams is a little different to singles. If you lose by 1 point against one of the best armies in the game in teams, you have done so well.
It's amazing. Yeah.
But in singles, if you lose by 1 point against the best army in the game, the best army in the game still beat you. So
Yeah.
there's a very different metric for success in teams, and blunting armies, blunting roles, players who can play a blunting army successfully are very, very important to the success of the overall team.
Mm.
Now, moving on to actually what it means as a technique.
Yeah.
In terms of teams, the way the impact of scoring high and scoring low is massive.
Yeah.
So let's say that you're playing a game and you're going towards a loss in the game, or let's say you're going towards a win, and you have an option in front of you where you can either go for a big win or you can stay really nice and stable. So
Yeah.
those are your two kind of decision pathways. Now, to go for a big win, you may introduce more risk into the way
Yes.
you play.
Yeah.
Now, there needs to be a decision made both in terms of the team overall and you individually, whether that risk is worth taking.
Mm.
And to put it into context, when you are losing a game, losing it at and scoring 1 or 2 points, so getting really beaten very badly versus losing it and getting 9 or 8 points
Yeah.
is as big as you winning a game
Yeah.
20-0
It's
versus
huge.
winning a game 11-9.
Yeah.
And not getting blown out and losing 20-0 is one of the most important factors for success in the WTC.
Yes.
And a player who can see that and analyze that it's not worth the risk of scoring 2 more differential points at the expense of losing 9 differential points and getting absolutely destroyed is key to success. And I think it's something that we really could do with developing on from WTC last year was one of the things that was
Yes.
highlighted.
Mm.
So I'd always say this, and it came up in ITT as well. I saw lots of
Mm.
players do this, that always try and keep your points floor high. It is
Yes.
far more important to go for a small loss than it is to risk the very little glory you actually gain from winning
Yeah.
the games.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry, I'm kind of like just keep going, but I'm
Yeah,
going to
no,
tie
do. It's
in one
great.
more point,
Yeah, yeah.
which is that in WTC and in these teams, with very successful singles players or players in general, we don't like losing. And we also like coming high on our rankings. So
Mm.
people love seeing the player rankings and being at the top of the player rankings. It's nice to boast about it. I love doing it as well.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But it's also very important that that is not the way you win the WTC.
Yeah.
It's the person who's getting 9 points in games that they shouldn't be getting 9 points in is more important to you than the person who's smashing the game they should be
Oh,
smashing.
completely. Yeah, absolutely.
So
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? And it's something where it's the unsung hero of the team because
Hmm.
it's keeping the worst case scenario that big armies and big threats in the game can represent nullified,
Hmm.
which opens up chances for your team elsewhere. It's fundamental to being hard to beat at all times, isn't it? Really, it's a very important part of that. This was something actually the very first events I did with the Team England stuff this year. I got worse differentials in multiple games in the first event I tried because I was trying to win those games because I still have my brain on like I want to win these games. I want to show that I
Hmm.
can win these games, and actually I needed to be just playing and keeping it very tight and keeping it very organized.
Yeah.
um, I guess one thing that I think is interesting to think about with this is where in sort of pairings these kinds of players and lists typically fall. Is this something you need? Is it a sort of player that needs to be able to go forwards really early and be able to take on anything? Is it something that sort of is kept? How do you see those kinds of lists?
Yeah, typically it would tend see there's two different ways you can play out your
Okay.
defenders, your people
Yeah.
who you put forward, and your opponent chooses the players that are going to play against them. There's
Yeah.
advantages to being a put forward in the sense that you get to select your map,
Yeah.
and there's disadvantage. Your opponent gets to pick the two perfect counters for you.
Mhm.
So a blunting army is able to usually mitigate one of those things because it's
Mm.
able to play into a wide range of armies, but it usually doesn't take advantage of the board choice.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting dynamic on the decisions you make, and it depends on your overall matrix. But there are a lot of situations where the blunting player will be the player who gets put forward.
Yes.
Maybe not initially when the boards are great, but somewhere later on down the line.
Yeah.
They also can come in and just help salvage a little bit of your pairings in the middle of
Yeah.
the pairing process in order for
Mm.
you to get better matchups towards the end of the process. So um, the key thing is not so much blunting armies, but it's players who can play like that.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So you have some players, and I think Team England, we're lucky, who are going to be really proud of themselves to lose a game
Yeah.
and get a lot of points out of it. Like they're
Yeah.
going to go into, I'm going to get 9 points out of this, and I'm going to feel proud.
Yeah.
And I think we have some really good players who are willing to do that,
Mm.
and we have some players who are probably not willing to do that. But we're going to make sure the roles match up correctly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly. Because there's real strength to having those go and get the big score players, and you need them to win the rounds as well. But as you say,
mhm,
it's having that balance in a squad, and I think I
mhm.
mean it's a massive test of mentality, isn't it? Because you have to stay extremely cool and focused. Is it one of those situations where sort of cross team communication in a round is really really important? You think in terms of making sure
Mm.
people know where they're trying to be and not taking risks?
Yeah, I think there's gonna come a time where where you have to take the risks.
Yeah,
The benefit of taking a risk increases the more your team needs you to score points.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
there may be a point where you're really losing, and then
Mm,
you bin off the points floor because it doesn't
yeah,
matter, you're losing the round anyway. So bin off the points floor, and we're going to try and salvage something out of this and get more points than we should. At that point, the players who prefer to play a blunting role are usually not so great.
yes,
This is where you need the players who are happy to who can work out a pushing role,
yeah.
come into the fore here, and
Mm.
we are spoiled for choice with that in Team England for sure. So yeah, I think as and communication is brilliant in WTC. I
Oh, of
think our team
course.
is brilliant at it. Like we have such good coaches.
Mm.
Getting told like, look, this is kind of the overall score, projected score, and you need to push. They can't tell you exactly what to do, but they can tell you need to push. And I think that's where the other players, the non-blunting players, come in. I think the blunting
Yeah.
players come in the others in the game that's going very very close to a draw.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think it'd be interesting to unpick a little bit what sorts of risks we are talking about, right? I think that's useful for the
Mhm.
layman as they kind of unpick this. But what are the kinds of decision points and actions you can take in a game that present that potential reward, but also can very severely risk your scores? What does taking risks look like? And what does not doing it look like?
Yeah. So I think the best example of this is if you take a primarily shooting army versus a primarily melee army.
Yeah.
Now, there may be a turn where the melee army is staged and presenting an opportunity to get shot to the shooting army.
Mm.
And the shooting army can make the decision to go to their maximum forward position in order to get angles and shoot the melee army.
Yeah.
Now, if that goes perfectly fine, you're going to take out so much of this melee army that they're not going to be able to recover from it.
Yeah.
But shooting in this game is based on dice rolls, and
Yeah.
it's both on your end and your opponent's end with the saves.
Mm,
So while we may calculate averages, 50% of the time you're going to go below average, and 25% of the time you're going to be in the bottom quarter
yeah.
of probability there.
Yeah.
So it's highly risky
Mm,
that your opponent might pass a few more saves. You might do a little less damage, and against a melee army, if you're in a forward position, they can then interact with you.
yes.
That's the risk you're taking. If I
Yeah.
don't kill them enough, they are going to be able to interact with me, tag me, slow me down, reduce the number of targets I have, and I'm going to lose assets. Now,
Yeah.
the alternative is you decide I'm going to do zero damage, stay out of their threat range, score some points, which is a completely different way of playing. You've given up your
Yes.
opportunity to score high points and retained your points floor. It's a trade-off, and you have to
Absolutely.
decide. But I personally, as a player, always prefer not stretching
Yeah.
and overextending to push
Yeah.
damage and push a differential. So you're very unlikely to see me get 20s. I don't really
Yeah.
push 20s,
Yeah.
but I like it when opponents like lose their cool and they overextend. Then you
Yes.
counterattack them, and yeah. So there's a lot of different ways of playing it, and I think that is a good example of risk and something that a lot
Yeah.
of players fall into.
Completely.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and finally, to end, I think that gives us a very clear sense of the topic. Do you have any examples from, I guess, editions or metas gone by of particularly good kind of blunting lists that you or others that you know have run that have
Mhm.
worked particularly well? And what would you say are the kinds of units and types of army that you personally think give you the best give and go to be in that kind of role?
Yeah. So I think a wide variety of armies can play it,
Hmm.
this role, but probably the premium blunting army at the moment in the meta that everyone can kind of relate to is probably Sisters of Battle.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Sisters of Battle are a slow army
Yeah.
with extreme consistency because they
Yeah.
have miracle dice. They have excellent durability and cheap units that can play the mission. So
Yeah.
this is a recipe for success because
Yeah.
everything you want to do to score points will always succeed with sisters.
Yeah.
You can't really push your opponent because you're not fast enough to do it unless something crazy happens or you have a good matchup. But against equal player skills, sisters always gravitate around the 9 to 11 point mark,
Yeah.
and that's their floor.
Yeah.
Even in bad matchups, they will score 9 points, even if they're getting
Yeah. Yeah.
tabled by the end of it. So, yeah, Sisters of Battle are very, very good blunting army.
Yeah, fantastic shout out. I really like that. Okay, Vic, thank you so much for explaining that. That's really useful. I'm going to have to go away and think about how I can teach my 6++ boys to take on this role a little bit more. I think we could definitely do with it. Been a pleasure to have you on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Do remember to support the Team England social pages. There'll be links in the description. And also, you can get involved in the team Discord. And there'll be all sorts of coverage coming out and obviously coverage during the WTC itself. So get involved. Let us know what you're thinking. Vic, thank you so much for coming on. And bye bye.
Cheers,
And
Tom.
we'll see you all again soon. See ya. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.